Welcome back, dear friends, to another journey into the extraordinary moments that often escape our notice in the rush of everyday life. Today, we venture into a realm where the veil between worlds grows thin, a story from the life of a humble Capuchin friar whose existence became a living testament to divine mysteries unfolding in our midst. As we continue our exploration of sacred encounters, I invite you to open your hearts to a revelation that reminds us: no soul passes from this world truly forgotten, and the heavens themselves weep for those we fail to remember. The Italian countryside of San Giovanni Rotondo bathes in golden Mediterranean light, its rolling hills and ancient olive groves bearing silent witness to centuries of human struggle and divine intervention. Among the stone buildings and narrow streets of this humble town, a remarkable man walked, prayed, and suffered in the early decades of the 20th century. Padre Pio, born Francesco Forgione, had already become known throughout Italy and beyond for bearing the wounds of Christ upon his body, the stigmata that marked him as something extraordinary in an age increasingly skeptical of the miraculous. Yet it was not these visible signs that most profoundly marked his ministry, but rather the moments when his perception extended beyond the material world, glimpsing realities hidden from ordinary sight. In the autumn of 1918, as the Great War drew to its bloody conclusion and a merciless influenza swept across continents, the small friary where Padre Pio lived followed its unchanging rhythms of prayer and service. The chapel bell marked the hours as it had for centuries, calling the brothers to their devotions while the world outside trembled with change and uncertainty. Padre Pio had developed the habit of spending long hours in prayer, often remaining in the chapel late into the night when his brothers had retired to their sparse cells. It was during one such night, the air unusually still, the only sound the distant cry of a night bird, that the encounter occurred which would trouble and inspire him for years to come. The small chapel was illuminated only by the flickering sanctuary lamp, its red glow casting elongated shadows across the stone floor. Padre Pio knelt before the tabernacle, his hands, already marked with the wounds that brought him both suffering and unwanted fame, clasped in prayer. According to his later testimony, recorded faithfully by his spiritual director Padre Agostino, he became aware of a presence beside him, a brightness that did not disturb the chapel's shadows, but seemed to exist in another dimension of light altogether. "I felt," he later recalled in a letter preserved in the friary archives, "as though a window had opened, not in the wall, but in the fabric of creation itself." The figure beside him revealed itself gradually, not through any change in its appearance, but through Padre Pio's growing ability to perceive what was already present. An angel stood there, not the sentimental cherub of popular imagination, but a being of terrible beauty and power, its countenance reflecting both the glory of heaven and an ineffable sorrow. Most striking to the friar, who would later struggle to find words adequate to describe the experience, were the tears that seemed to flow from the angel's eyes, tears that did not fall, but remained suspended, each one containing what appeared to be landscapes, faces, and memories. "Why do you weep?" Padre Pio finally managed to ask, his voice barely a whisper in the silent chapel. The angel's response came not in words, but in a direct communication to his spirit, a transmission of understanding that bypassed language entirely. In that moment of connection, Padre Pio perceived that the angel wept for a soul, a man who had died alone in a distant village during the war, his body discovered days after his passing, his funeral attended by none, his name soon to fade from living memory. No prayers had been offered for his peaceful repose, no masses said for the repose of his soul, no flowers placed upon his unmarked grave. The vision deepened as Padre Pio was granted insight into this forgotten life. The man, Giuseppe Bartoli was his name, had lived a quiet existence as a cobbler in a village near Foggia. Neither particularly virtuous, nor especially sinful, he had moved through his 67 years with modest ambitions and ordinary failings. His wife had preceded him in death by 12 years. His only son had fallen at Caporetto in the early days of the war. When the influenza claimed him, there remained no one to mourn his passing or to pray for his soul's journey. In the economy of divine mercy, as it was revealed to Padre Pio, such souls deserve particular compassion, not because their sins are greater, but because they lack the spiritual support that comes from remembrance. The angel showed me, Padre Pio later confided to Padre Agostino, that in the fullness of eternity, no soul passes unmourned. If mankind forgets, heaven remembers. If earthly voices fall silent, celestial choirs sing names unknown to history but precious to God. The tears of the angel, he came to understand, were not merely expressions of sorrow, but acts of intercession, each suspended tear containing the perfect prayer for Giuseppe's purification and peace. The experience transformed Padre Pio's understanding of his vocation. From that night forward, he instituted a special daily prayer for what he called the souls whom no one remembers, those who had passed from earth without leaving behind mourners to pray for their eternal repose. Each evening after Compline, the final prayer of the day, he would remain in the chapel and recite a special litany for these forgotten souls, his voice soft but fervent as he petitioned heaven on their behalf. Several of his fellow friars reported seeing him in what appeared to be conversation during these prayers, his lips moving as though responding to voices they could not hear. This practice soon spread beyond the walls of the friary. As pilgrims came to seek Padre Pio's counsel and blessing, he would often assign as penance not merely prayers for their own sins, but also prayers for unknown souls who had no one to remember them. Adopt a forgotten soul, he would instruct, and make its cause your own before the throne of God. This spiritual adoption became a hallmark of the communities that formed around his ministry, with thousands pledging to remember in their daily prayers those who had otherwise passed from all human memory. One particularly moving testimony comes from Maria Campanelli, a woman from Naples who had traveled to San Giovanni Rotondo in 1921, seeking healing for a chronic respiratory ailment. After confession with Padre Pio, she expected the customary penance of prayers for her own spiritual healing. Instead, he looked at her with unusual intensity and said, "There is a man named Paolo Ricci who died 3 days ago in a hospital in Bari. No one mourns him, no one remembers. I ask you to pray for him each day for a year, as though he were your own beloved father." Stunned by the specificity of this request, Maria agreed, though she had never heard of Paolo Ricci and had no connection to Bari. Upon her return home, driven by curiosity as much as obedience, she took the train to Bari and inquired at the hospital there. To her astonishment, she confirmed that a man of that exact name had indeed died on the date Padre Pio had mentioned. He had been a dock worker with no family, his body claimed by the city for burial in a pauper's grave. This verification transformed what had been an act of obedience into a profound personal mission. Maria not only prayed for Paolo daily, but also arranged for a proper headstone for his grave and established a small fund for masses to be said for his soul. In remembering the forgotten, Padre Pio once wrote in a letter to a spiritual daughter, "We participate in the perfect memory of God, who forgets nothing and no one. Each prayer for an unknown soul becomes a light in darkness, a hand extended across the chasm between worlds." This understanding shaped his ministry in countless ways, from the manner in which he celebrated Mass, with long pauses that some attributed to visions, but which he privately explained as moments when he prayed for souls revealed to him as needing intercession, to his insistence that the friars maintain meticulous records of prayer requests for the deceased. The story of the weeping angel became known only gradually during Padre Pio's lifetime, shared first with his closest confidants, and then, as his fame grew, recounted more widely as evidence of his extraordinary spiritual perceptions. Some skeptics dismissed it as pious imagination or even deliberate embellishment to enhance his growing reputation for sanctity. Yet those who knew him best testified to the profound effect this vision had on his spiritual practices and teachings. Padre Raffaele, who served as his assistant for many years, observed, "Before that night, he prayed with devotion. After it, he prayed as one who sees the invisible world more clearly than the visible one." Perhaps most compelling are the numerous accounts of individuals who, having never heard the story directly from Padre Pio, reported similar directions in the confessional. Dozens of documented cases exist of penitents being instructed to pray for specific deceased individuals, complete with names, dates, and locations, whom they had never known and whose existence they subsequently verified. This pattern suggests not an isolated mystical experience, but an ongoing charism, a special spiritual gift granted to Padre Pio that allowed him to perceive souls in need of prayer and to enlist others in the work of remembrance. The theological implications of this account extend far beyond one friar's mystical experience. They touch upon fundamental questions about the communion of saints, the efficacy of prayer for the dead, and the nature of memory in the divine economy of salvation. If angels weep for the forgotten, what does this reveal about the interconnectedness of all souls, living and deceased? If heaven remembers those whom earth forgets, what responsibility do we bear toward those who leave this life unmourned and unremembered? For those who gathered around Padre Pio during his lifetime, and for the millions who continue to find inspiration in his example today, the story of the weeping angels serves as both challenge and consolation. It challenges us to expand our circle of spiritual concern beyond our immediate loved ones, to embrace those who have no one to speak their names in prayer. It consoles us with the assurance that divine compassion extends to every soul, that no life concludes truly unmourned, and that heavenly intercession continues even when earthly memory fails. As our time together draws to a close for today, I invite you to carry this story with you into your own prayer life. Perhaps there are forgotten souls connected to your own history, distant relatives whose names have faded from family memory, previous occupants of your home, or unknown individuals buried in cemeteries you pass without notice. In the spirit of Padre Pio's ministry, consider adopting such souls in prayer, extending to them the gift of remembrance that is, in its own way, a participation in the divine attribute of perfect memory. We remain together in this community of faith and wonder, united across time and space by our shared journey toward understanding. Until we meet again to explore another chapter in this continuing story of grace breaking into our world, remember that between heaven and earth, between the seen and unseen realms, angels still weep for the forgotten, not tears of despair, but tears of compassionate intercession that invite us to join in their sacred work of remembrance.